The night was quiet. Only the sound of broken metal and burning fire filled the air. The ruins of the alien colony were still smoking, destroyed by war that had passed only days ago. Among the shadows, a small alien girl hid inside the remains of a broken building. Her skin glowed faintly in the dark, her eyes wide with fear, and her tiny hands shook as she hugged her knees. She had heard stories of humans, stories that made her heart freeze. Humans were said to be tall and merciless, destroyers who captured her people. She was told they ate the weak, used them, and left nothing behind. So when she heard heavy footsteps approaching, her breath caught in her throat. She pressed herself deeper into the rubble, hoping to disappear. The footsteps grew louder, steady, powerful. A shadow fell across the broken wall. The girl's heart raced. She wanted to run, but her legs were too weak. She whispered to herself, "If he finds me, it will be the end." Then she saw him, a human, tall and strong, dressed in armor that looked heavy and cold. His face was hidden by a helmet, a faint blue light glowing where his eyes should be. In his hand, he carried a long weapon, one that could end her life in an instant. The girl gasped softly, too frightened to breathe. The human stopped. He looked around the ruins, scanning with slow, careful movements. Something about his posture was different, not cruel, not violent, but searching. He tilted his head, almost as if he could sense her hiding. The girl covered her mouth, fighting back a sob. Then, to her shock, the human spoke. His voice was calm, deep, and strange, but not harsh. "I know you're there," he said slowly. "I won't hurt you." The girl froze, her mind screaming not to believe him. Every story said humans lied. Humans killed. Humans never showed mercy. The human crouched down, laying his weapon carefully on the ground. He raised both hands, showing they were empty. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "I just want to help." The girl shook her head quickly, tears running down her cheeks. "No," she whispered. You will eat me." For a long moment, the human was silent. Then, slowly, he removed his helmet. The girl expected to see a monster, sharp teeth and cruel eyes, but instead she saw a face, tired and rough, yet strangely gentle. The man's eyes met hers, and they were not cold. They were human, warm and alive. He reached into a small pack on his side. The girl tensed, thinking he was pulling out a weapon, but instead he took out a small piece of food wrapped in a thin cover. He placed it on the ground and pushed it toward her. "Eat," he said softly. "You must be hungry." The girl stared at the food, her stomach twisted with hunger, but fear held her back. She had not eaten properly in days. Only scraps she found among the ruins. Her body screamed to take it, but her mind whispered danger. She looked up at him with wide, mistrusting eyes. The human did not move closer. Instead, he sat down on the ground, cross-legged. He kept his weapon far away and leaned back slightly. He looked almost tired, as if he had no strength to fight. "Take it," he said again. "I promise, it is safe." Minutes passed, the silence heavy, finally trembling. The girl reached out and pulled the food close. She sniffed it, still suspicious, then took a small bite. Her eyes widened. It was soft, warm, and safe. Tears rolled down her face as she ate hungrily. The human watched but did not disturb her. Something stirred in her heart, confusion, doubt, and a small spark of hope. Maybe this one was different. Maybe not all humans were monsters, but deep inside, the fear still clung to her. She whispered, almost too soft to hear, "Why? Why are you helping me?" The man looked at her with quiet eyes. He did not answer right away, but his voice was steady when he spoke, because no one should be alone like this. He said, "Not even you." The girl's heart trembled. For the first time, she felt something she had not felt in a long time. Not safety, not yet, but the beginning of it. A fragile, uncertain hope. The night grew colder as the ruins whispered with silence. The small alien girl sat near the broken wall, still holding the food the human had given her. Her eyes, large and glowing faintly in the dark, kept looking at him with fear. She had expected pain, capture, or even death, but instead, he had given her food and warmth. It made no sense to her heart. The human stayed where he was, sitting calmly with his helmet resting beside him. His weapon was still on the ground, far enough that she could see he was not planning to grab it. Every move he made was slow, careful, almost gentle. She could feel that he was trying not to frighten her more. Still, she was afraid, her body shaking every time his eyes met hers. Finally, he spoke again, his voice quiet but firm. "My name is Daniel," he said. "I am not your enemy." The girl hugged her knees tighter, her tiny body trembling. Her voice came out like a whisper. You are human. Humans hurt us." Daniel's face hardened, but not in anger. It was pain. He looked down at the ground for a moment before answering. "Not all humans," he said. "Not me." The girl shook her head quickly, refusing to believe her people had been taken. Her home destroyed, and everything she loved was gone. Her mind screamed that this must be a trick. But her empty stomach and her tired heart wanted to trust him. It was a battle inside her that she could not win. Daniel reached into his pack again, this time pulling out a small metal container. He opened it, and warm steam rose into the air. Carrying the smell of cooked food, he placed it between them, sliding it gently across the ground. "You can eat more," he said. "You need strength." Then, to her shock, he took a spoon and ate a bite himself. "It's safe," he added, showing her with his actions, not only words. The girl stared at him, her fear mixing with confusion. Why would he share his food? Why would he sit with no weapon? Why would a human treat her like this, when she was told humans saw her kind as nothing? Her tiny hands reached out slowly, pulling the container closer. She took a bite, her eyes watering again as warmth filled her. It was the first real meal she had tasted in many days. For a while, there was silence between them, only the sound of her eating. Daniel leaned against the broken wall, watching the dark sky above. His armor looked heavy, scratched from battles, but his expression was calm. Finally, the girl spoke again, her voice thin but trembling with need. "Why?" she asked. "Why you help me?" Daniel looked at her, his eyes steady and honest. "Because I saw a child who was afraid," he said, "and I could not walk away." The girl's heart twisted at his words. A child, he had called her that. Not a creature, not an enemy, but a child. Her mind wanted to reject it, but something inside her wanted to believe. Her people had always whispered in the shadows that humans were only destroyers, but this Daniel, was showing something else. Still, fear chained her, and she whispered again, "If I trust you, you will hurt me later." Daniel shook his head slowly. "I will not hurt you," he said. "I give you my word." The word promise was not common in her language, but she understood his tone, the way his voice carried weight. She looked at him carefully, searching his eyes for lies. All she found was tired truth. Then came the moment of choice. The girl's legs trembled as she stood up slowly. Her heart raced, every part of her screaming with fear. But she took one small step closer to him. Her eyes never left his face, ready to run if he moved too fast. Daniel did not move. He stayed where he was, calm and patient. The girl stopped a few feet away. Clutching the container of food, she whispered, I will trust you for tonight." Her voice cracked with both fear and courage. Daniel gave a small nod, as if accepting a sacred oath. "That is enough," he said gently. For the first time, she sat near him, though still keeping a small distance. The fire of the ruins glowed faintly around them, painting shadows on the walls. The air was heavy with silence. But it was not the silence of enemies. It was fragile, uncertain peace. A peace built on a choice that could change both their lives. The girl still trembled, still afraid, but deep inside, a spark of something new grew. It was not trust yet. Not fully, but the beginning of it. A seed planted in the ruins, fragile and small. And as the night stretched on, she realized something she never thought possible. A human had given her not pain, not chains, not death, but the smallest taste of hope. The night stretched on, cold winds moving through the ruins. The small alien girl sat near Daniel, though still a little distance away. Her glowing eyes looked down at the ground, but her mind was full of thoughts. She had chosen to trust him for the night, but her heart still feared he might betray her. Yet something inside told her that he was different. Daniel sat quietly, his back against a broken wall. He did not speak much, only watched the dark sky as if searching for answers. The girl finally broke the silence, her voice shaking like a leaf. "You want to know why I hide here?" she whispered. Daniel turned his head slightly, his eyes calm. "Yes," he said softly. "Tell me, at first." She could not speak, her throat closed with fear and memories. But slowly, words escaped her lips, heavy and painful. "My people. We lived here. This colony was our home," she began. Her small hands tightened around her knees, her voice trembling. "We were not soldiers, not fighters, only families, children and elders." She paused, breathing hard as tears shone in her eyes. Then war came. She continued, her voice breaking. Ships filled the sky. Fire rained from above, everything burned. Her small body shook, as if she still felt the flames. "They told us humans would take us, make us slaves, or kill us if we fought." Her voice cracked again. I saw my mother fall when the fire came." Daniel's chest tightened, but he let her speak. She wiped her tears with shaky hands, but more kept falling. "My father tried to run with me, but soldiers came, humans in armor like yours." Her eyes flicked to his armor with fear, then back down. "They shouted words I did not understand, and then they dragged him away." Her voice became a whisper, filled with sorrow. "I have not seen him since." The silence between them grew heavy. Daniel's jaw clenched, pain showing in his eyes. He wanted to speak, to defend himself, to say not all humans were the same, but he knew her pain was real. Her story carved into her soul, so he only listened, giving her space to let the hurt flow out. The girl hugged her knees tighter, her voice breaking into sobs. "They told me humans eat children like me, that if I was caught, I would die." Her glowing eyes looked at him with fear and doubt. I wanted to believe it was only stories, but the fire, the screams, it felt true. Her words stabbed into Daniel's heart like knives. He could not deny the horrors. He could only carry them. Finally, he spoke. His voice quiet but strong. "Not all humans are like that," he said. "Many fight for power, for greed, but not all." The girl shook her head slowly, not ready to believe. "You wear their armor," she said. "How can you be different?" Daniel looked down at the scratches on his chest plate. He took a long breath before answering. "This armor is mine," he said. "But I do not fight for the same reasons." His voice carried weight, slow and honest. "I was a soldier once, but I walked away when I saw what war was doing." He looked at her, his eyes full of guilt. "I cannot change what others did to your people, but I can choose not to be like them." The girl stared at him, confused. Her people always believed humans were one kind, cruel, united in their hunger. But here was one saying he had turned away, saying he chose not to be a monster. Could it be true? Could one human be different from the rest? Her mind fought. With her heart, fear pulling one way, hope pulling another, she whispered, her voice small, "Do you ever regret what you did?" Daniel's face darkened, his eyes heavy with memories. "Yes," he said firmly. Every day, his words were sharp with honesty. No mask, no excuse. The girl felt something shift inside her chest. For the first time, she saw a human who carried pain like hers. A human who understood loss, who knew guilt. Maybe that was why his eyes looked tired. Why his voice carried weight. Not the voice of a destroyer, but of someone who had seen too much. It made her feel less alone, even if only a little. The night was quiet again, the ruins whispering with the wind. Daniel finally said, "You don't have to trust me yet. But I want you to know I will not leave you." His words settled deep in her heart, soft but unshakable. The girl closed her eyes. Tears still falling, but her body began to relax. For the first time in many nights, she allowed herself to sleep. Not safe, not fully, but safer than before. Daniel watched her as she drifted into uneasy dreams, his mind heavy with her story, his soul burning with silent anger at what had been done. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was certain. He had made a choice, and so had she. In the ruins of war, a fragile bond had begun to grow. The morning light broke through the smoke-filled sky. Shadows stretched across the ruins, and cold wind carried the smell of ash. The alien girl opened her glowing eyes slowly, still weak, but calmer than before, for the first time in many nights. She had slept without running or hiding. Her small body ached, but she felt a little safer than she had ever thought possible. Daniel sat nearby, keeping watch with steady eyes. He had not slept much, his mind too heavy with her story. Every sound in the ruins made him tense, but he kept still when the girl stirred. He looked at her gently. "You should eat," he said quietly. "We must keep moving soon." The girl blinked at him, confusion filling her face. "Moving? Where?" she asked softly, her voice still fragile. Daniel tightened the strap of his armor. His jaw set with determination. "Somewhere safe," he answered. "I promised myself last night I will not leave you here." The words carried weight, heavy and unshakable. The girl shook her head quickly, fear rising again. "No, no. Humans will find us," she whispered. "They always come back." Her small hands trembled as she hugged her knees. "I cannot run anymore. I am too weak." Daniel crouched down, lowering himself to her level. He met her glowing eyes and spoke. With firm, steady tone, "Then I will carry you," he said. "No one will touch you while I still breathe." The girl gasped, staring at him with shock. Her heart pounded, unable to understand why he would make such a promise. She whispered, "Why? Why you care for me?" Daniel's eyes softened, but his voice was filled with quiet strength. "Because I see more than an alien," he said. "I see a child who deserves to live." The girl's lips trembled, her eyes filling with tears. No one had ever said such words to her, not even from her own people in the chaos of war. To her, those words felt like a shield, wrapping around her fragile heart. But the silence of the ruins broke suddenly. A distant roar of engines shook the ground, echoing through the air. Daniel's eyes hardened as he looked toward the horizon. The girl froze, terror flashing in her face. "They are coming," she whispered, her body trembling. Daniel stood quickly, grabbing his weapon from the ground. His voice was sharp but calm. "Stay behind me." He moved toward a gap in the wall. Scanning the skies, dark shapes appeared above the smoke. Small patrol ships circling like vultures. They were searching, hunting for survivors. The girls' breath came fast, panic rising. "They will take me. They will take me," she cried, her glowing eyes wide with terror. Daniel turned to her, his voice strong and commanding. "Look at me," he said firmly, and she froze. He stepped closer, lowering his weapon, his eyes locked on hers. "I promised you last night," he said, his voice heavy with fire. "I will protect you, no matter what comes." He placed a hand gently on her shoulder, not forcing, only steady. "You are not alone anymore. Do you hear me?" The girl's tears spilled as she nodded weakly. The sound of engines grew louder. Dust falling from the ruins above them. Daniel's eyes narrowed as he scanned for a path out. There was a broken tunnel leading deeper into the ruins. It was dangerous. Unstable, but it was their only chance. He motioned toward it. "We move now," he said. The girl hesitated, fear chaining her legs. Her body remembered fire and screams. Remembered soldiers pulling her father away. But when she looked at Daniel, she saw something different. A human who stood like a wall between her and the nightmare. She whispered, "If you promise, I will follow." Daniel gave a single nod, sharp and certain. "I promise," he said, his voice like steel. Then he lifted her gently, carrying her as if she weighed nothing. The girl buried her face into his chest, her tears dampening his armor. For the first time, she wanted to believe in his words. They slipped into the tunnel as engines thundered above. Shadows swallowed them. The air cold and damp, the girl held onto him tightly, trembling but clinging to the promise he had made. Daniel moved carefully but quickly, every sound behind. Them reminding him of the danger. He would not fail her. Not after hearing her story. Not after seeing her pain. The ground rumbled as patrol ships scanned the ruins. But inside the darkness, the girl whispered softly, "You are not like the others." She said, "You are not a monster." Daniel's chest ached at her words. "I am only human," he replied. "But I will be the human who keeps you safe." And, with those words, the promise was sealed. Not a promise of comfort, not of easy days ahead, but a promise forged in fear, danger, and determination. A promise that would soon be tested by fire and blood. For in the ruins of war, hope was fragile. But it had found a protector. The tunnel walls were damp and cracked, echoing with each step Daniel took. The alien girl clung to his chest, her glowing eyes wide as she listened to the sounds behind them, above the ruins. The roar of engines grew louder, vibrating through. The broken stone, she trembled, whispering, "They are searching. They will find us." Daniel held her tighter, his voice steady. "Not if we keep moving." His boots splashed through shallow puddles, the tunnel stretching into darkness. Every few steps, he stopped to listen, his trained ears catching faint movements behind them. Scanners, drones, and soldiers. The enemy was close. Daniel's jaw tightened, his mind racing for a way out. He had promised her safety. And he would not break that promise. The girl buried her face against him, her small hands gripping the plates of his armor. She remembered fire raining from the skies, soldiers dragging her father away. The sound of engines above brought those memories back like fresh wounds. Her body shook, but Daniel's steady heartbeat against her ear gave her a fragile anchor. She whispered again, "You will not leave me." Daniel's voice was iron. Never. Suddenly, the tunnel shook with a blast. Dust raining down from the ceiling. Daniel turned quickly, pulling the girl close as bright lights cut into the darkness. Shadows moved, enemy soldiers dropping into the tunnel from above. Their helmets glowed, their weapons ready. Scanning the black corridor, one shouted, "Movement ahead." And the chase began. Daniel ran, his steps fast and powerful. Carrying the girl against his chest, blaster fire ripped through the tunnel walls. Sparks flying in the air. The girl cried out in fear, her arms wrapping tighter around him. Daniel shielded her with his body, moving faster despite the weight of his armor. He ducked into a side passage, turning sharply as beams of light followed close. The tunnel twisted like a maze. broken by collapsed stone and rusted pipes. Daniel moved with instinct, his soldiers' training guiding every turn. But the enemy was fast, their shouts echoing. Through the passages, he slid down a slope, holding the girl tightly as they landed in a deeper chamber. She gasped, her glowing eyes looking at him with panic. "They are coming." Daniel placed her gently behind a slab of broken stone. "Stay low," he whispered, his eyes sharp. "I'll draw them away." The girl shook her head violently, tears falling. "No, you will die. They will kill you." "Like they killed my people." Daniel gripped her hand for a moment. Steady and warm. "I made a promise," he said. "I will not break it." Blaster fire lit the chamber as soldiers poured in, their armor gleaming in the light. Daniel grabbed his weapon and fired back, each shot precise and deadly. The tunnel shook with the echoes of war, sparks and smoke filling the air. The girl covered her ears, trembling as the chaos unfolded before her. But through her fear, she saw something she never expected. Daniel did not fight like the soldiers she remembered. He did not strike in anger or cruelty, but with purpose to protect. Every move he made placed himself between her and the enemy. Every shot he fired was to shield her. Not to conquer, she realized with wide eyes that this human was fighting for her, not against her. More soldiers pressed forward, shouting orders, their weapons blazing. Daniel gritted his teeth, his armor scorched with fire. But he stood firm. The girl cried out, "Run! Leave me! Save yourself!" Daniel turned his head sharply, his eyes fierce. "I told you," he growled. "I will never leave you." With a powerful move, he hurled a smoke grenade into the chamber. Thick clouds filled the air, blinding the enemy. He grabbed the girl, once more lifting her into his arms and sprinting through the haze. Blaster fire cut wildly through the smoke, but Daniel's steps never slowed. He found another passage and pushed forward, his lungs burning. The girl clung to him, her heart pounding with terror. But inside that fear, a new feeling sparked trust. She whispered into his chest, "You fight for me. You keep your promise." Daniel did not answer, only ran faster. His eyes locked on the light ahead. They burst from the tunnel into the open air. The ruins stretching before them, engines roared above as ships circled low, their spotlights cutting. Across the broken city, Daniel scanned quickly, spotting the remains of a collapsed tower. It was dangerous, but it offered cover. Without hesitation, he sprinted toward it, weaving through fire and shadow. Behind them, soldiers shouted. The chase relentless. The girl's tears streamed down her face. But her voice was different now. Not only fear, but something more. "You are different," she whispered. "You are not like them." Daniel tightened his grip, his voice low but fierce. "I am only a man," he said, "but I am a man who will keep his word." As they vanished into the ruins, the hunt pressed closer. The girl's heart pounded, knowing the danger was not over. But one thing was clear, she was no longer running alone. For the first time since the war began, she believed in the promise of hope, and the chase, though terrifying, became the start of her fight to live. The ruins echoed with the thunder of engines. Searchlights cut across the broken city. Chasing shadows, Daniel moved quickly between collapsed walls, his armor scorched and heavy. In his arms, the alien girl clung to him, trembling but no longer, begging him to run without her. Something in her heart had begun to change. They stopped inside the shell of a ruined tower. The walls were cracked, the roof broken, but it gave them cover for a moment. Daniel placed the girl gently against a slab of stone. His chest rose and fell with hard breaths, but his eyes stayed sharp and calm. "We can't run forever," he said, his voice low. "They will not stop." The girl's glowing eyes looked at him, wide with fear, but also something new. She whispered, Then what do we do?" Daniel crouched beside her, checking the charge on his weapon. "We stand," he answered, his tone firm. "We fight if we must. And we survive." The words felt impossible to her ears, yet his confidence wrapped around her like a shield. The girl shook her head, her voice breaking. "I am small, I am weak. I cannot fight like you." Daniel looked at her, his gaze steady. "You don't need to fight like me," he said. "You only need to be brave, even a little, when it matters." His words planted something deep inside her suddenly. A sharp sound split the air, the whine of a scanner drone. Daniel spun, firing a quick shot that shattered the machine in a flash of sparks. But the blast echoed, giving away their position. Engines roared closer, and the ground shook as enemy soldiers closed in. Daniel gritted his teeth, standing tall, his weapon ready. The girl grabbed his arm, panic in her voice. "They are too many. You will die." Daniel placed his free hand over hers, steady and warm. "Then I die protecting you," he said simply. Her chest tightened, tears filling her eyes. "No," she whispered. Not alone. The soldiers came, their armored boots pounding against broken stone. Light flooded the ruins, voices shouting orders, weapons raised. Daniel pulled the girl behind cover, firing back with precise shots. Blasts lit the night, dust filling the air. The girl covered her ears, but peeked out, watching him fight. He stood like an unmovable wall, his body shielding her from every attack. Each step he took was not for himself, but for her. Each blast he fired carried the weight of his promise. And in that moment, something inside the girl cracked open. She realized she could not let him carry the burden alone. Her eyes darted to the ground, where a small broken piece of enemy tech sparked faintly, a half-destroyed beacon, its light flickering weakly. Her people had used similar devices. She knew what it was. If she could disable it fully, it might blind the enemy scanners for a few minutes. Her hands shook, but she crawled forward. Grabbing the device, Daniel shouted, "Stay down." As fire exploded against the walls, but the girl's heart pounded with new strength. She whispered to herself, "Be brave." Even a little, her fingers worked quickly, pulling at wires and panels. The beacon sparked violently, then went dark. Suddenly, the searchlights above flickered and cut out. The enemy's scanners glitched, their helmets flashing warnings. Daniel glanced back at her, surprise in his eyes. The girl crouched there, okay, her tiny hands burned slightly, but her face firm. "I helped," she whispered, her voice trembling but proud. Daniel's chest swelled with something beyond words. "You did more than help," he said. "You saved us." The girl's glowing eyes widened, her fear mixing with pride for the first time. She had always seen herself as helpless, only someone to be hunted. But now, she had stood beside him, even in her small way. The battle raged on, but the enemy stumbled in confusion. Daniel seized the chance, firing with precision and pushing them back. The girl stayed low. But when she saw another drone crawl through the rubble, she threw a rock at it with shaking hands. It cracked against the lens, distracting it long enough for Daniel to finish it. Her heart raced, but she felt a strange warmth of courage inside. At last, the remaining soldiers retreated to regroup. The ruins grew quiet again, smoke rising into the cold night. Daniel lowered his weapon. Breathing heavily, he looked at the girl, his face serious but his eyes full of pride. "You stood with me," he said, his voice soft. "You were brave." The girl's tears came again, but this time not from fear. Her small voice whispered, "I was afraid, but I wanted to be like you." Daniel knelt down, resting a hand gently on her shoulder. "You don't need to be like me," he said. "You only need to be you. And you are stronger than you know." Her heart trembled. But she believed him, even just a little. The night was not over. The war was not done. But something had changed in the ruins. The girl was no longer only terrified and small. She had stood beside a human, not as prey, but as someone with courage. And together, they would face whatever came next. The ruins were quiet again, smoke drifting into the pale morning sky. Daniel leaned against a broken pillar, his chest rising with heavy breaths beside him. The alien girl sat with her knees pulled close, her glowing eyes still wet with tears. But this time, her tears were not only from fear, they carried something new, relief. She had stood with him. She had found a piece of courage inside herself. Daniel looked at her with steady eyes, his voice calm but firm. "They will not stop hunting us," he said, "but I will not let them take you." The girl stared at him, confused but touched. "Why do you care so much?" she whispered, her voice soft. Daniel looked at the broken city around them, then back at her. "Because I promised," he said simply. "And because someone must show you that not all humans are monsters." Her small chest rose and fell quickly, her heart struggling to believe, but every word he spoke, every action he made was proof enough. She whispered, "You fight for me, even when you could run away." Daniel gave a tired smile, shaking his head. "No, little one," he said. "I fight with you, not only for you." Those words struck her deeply, for so long. She had seen herself as weak, as prey, as someone to be protected or hunted. But Daniel's words made her feel something new. She was not only a burden, she was someone who could stand. Even in her small way, her glowing eyes softened, and she nodded slowly. Hours passed as they moved carefully through the ruins. The sound of engines faded into the distance. The enemy patrols shifting away. Daniel carried her when her legs grew weak, guiding her through broken streets. Every step they took was heavy with danger, but also heavy with determination. The girl no longer begged him to leave her behind. She held on and whispered, "We will survive, at last." They reached the edge of the ruins. Beyond the broken city lay the silent forest, its trees twisted but alive. Daniel scanned the horizon, his soldier's eyes always searching for threats. The girl stood beside him, her small hand clutching his armored glove. Her voice trembled as she asked, "Where will we go?" Daniel looked toward the rising sun. "There is a hidden camp," he said. "A place where survivors gather, far from the war." His voice softened. "I will take you there. You will not be alone anymore." The girl's heart pounded. The thought of safety almost too much to believe. She whispered, "Safe. With other children?" Daniel nodded firmly. "Yes, safe." The girl's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they glowed with hope. She had never thought she would see another day without fear, but now a human had promised her not only survival, but a future. And she believed him, because every promise he made, he had kept. Her small voice whispered, "Thank you, Daniel." The forest was thick and silent, shadows curling around every path. Daniel moved carefully, his weapon always ready. But he felt something different now, a purpose stronger than survival. He was no longer running only from war. He was guiding a child toward life. The weight of that gave him strength as they walked. The girl began to speak again. She told him stories of her people before the war, stories of laughter and song. Her voice carried sadness, but also warmth, as if remembering kept them alive inside her. Daniel listened quietly, never interrupting. Every word reminded him why he could not fail her. Night came again, and they camped beneath the shelter of a fallen tree. Daniel built a small fire, its light dancing against the leaves. The girl sat close, wrapped in a piece of his cloak. She looked at him, her eyes glowing softly in the firelight. "You are different," she said. "You are not the monster I was told about." Daniel's face was tired, his scars deep, but his voice was gentle. "I am only human," he said. "But being human means I can choose who I am." He looked at her with steady eyes. "And I choose to protect you." Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Then, I choose to believe you." The fire cracked softly. Sealing their unspoken bond, the forest around them was dark and full of danger. But in that small circle of firelight, there was something new. Not just fear, not just survival, but the fragile beginning of trust. The girl leaned against him, her tiny body warm against his armor, and Daniel rested his hand gently on her shoulder, steady and firm for the first time since the war began. She closed her eyes without trembling. She did not feel hunted. She did not feel alone. She felt safe, not because the world was safe, but because she was not facing it alone. Her dreams that night were not of fire and screams, but of a tomorrow where she could live. And that tomorrow began with one human's promise. At dawn, they would keep moving. The road still long and dangerous, but the girl no longer feared every step. She had found her strength, and Daniel had found his purpose. Together, they had built something fragile yet unbreakable in the ruins of war. They had created a new beginning,